7:15 in the morning, the 12th of June, 1962. A guard walks the tier on the morning count. In one cell, the man will not get up. The guard reaches through the bars and pushes his shoulder. The head rolls off the pillow and drops to the floor. It lands hard, and its nose breaks. The head is not a head. It is a paste of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper. It has been painted the color of skin. The hair is real, swept up from the floor of the prison barbershop. There are two more like it in the cells next door. 3 men are gone from the most watched prison in the United States. This island existed to solve one problem. Some men could not be held by ordinary penitentiaries. They bought guards, they dug, they walked out. So the government built a prison for prisoners. 1.25 miles of freezing salt water stood between it and the city. Guard towers, tool-proof steel, metal detectors at every door. 13 head counts a day. It had the lowest ratio of prisoners to officers in the country, and it had a promise, repeated for 29 years. Nobody escapes from the rock. By that morning in 1962, the promise had already been tested 14 times. 36 men had tried it. 23 were caught, 6 were shot dead, 2 drowned, and 5 names simply stopped. Missing and presumed drowned. Presumed is a strange word for an escape-proof prison. Before this story ends, a man will starve himself thin to fit through a set of bars. Marines will drop grenades through the roof of an American prison. A convict will swim to the shore of San Francisco and live. And a clerk in Washington will kill Alcatraz with a column of numbers. But it begins with a broken plaster nose on a concrete floor. The government closed its file on those 3 men in 1979. The other file, the one that names them as fugitives, has never been closed at all. The Warden of Alcatraz ate his lunch among the men he was paid to contain. James Johnston walked into the prisoner's dining hall with no guard beside him. He did it as a matter of routine, year after year. In 1937, an inmate attacked him at his own table. He came back the next day and ate there again. Johnston had already hardened Folsom and San Quentin before this. He was chosen in November of 1933. He ran the island for 14 years, and no warden after him lasted as long. So here is the question underneath this whole act. Who was actually in charge on Alcatraz? The warden or the water? The water got there first. In 1859, the Army built a fort here to guard the entrance of the bay. Its guns never fought a battle. During the Civil War, the island found its real use instead. It took deserters, insubordinate soldiers, and Confederate sympathizers from the California coast. So why did the Army stop shooting from this rock and start locking men up on it? Because out here, the water does the work that walls do everywhere else. No sentry can be bribed into draining a bay. In 1868, it became a permanent military prison. It stayed one for 65 years. The name is older than any of it. In 1775, a Spanish lieutenant mapped the bay. He called this rock the Island of the Pelicans. Its first building was a lighthouse, not a wall. The most feared name in American prisons means seabirds. Then the prisoners built the thing that made it famous. Between 1910 and 1912, military convicts raised the main cell house. The budget was $250,000. Concrete, poured on a rock in the middle of salt water. Hold on to that detail. It comes back at the end of this story, and it wins. Then Washington took the island and asked it to do something new. The Justice Department had a problem it could state in one sentence. There were men the other federal penitentiaries did not know how to hold. It wanted one prison for those men, and only for them. On the 12th of October, 1933, it took the island from the Army. So what does a government build when it decides the problem is people and not walls? The Army had built a prison. The Justice Department rebuilt it into a machine. The old soft iron came out of the cell fronts. Tool-proof steel went in, opened only from control boxes at the end of each tier. Gun galleries were mounted above the corridors. Armed officers could cover the whole cell house without ever walking among the men. Electromagnetic metal detectors were installed at the doors of the workshops. Tear gas canisters were fixed into the ceiling of the dining hall. They could be fired from outside the room by an officer who was not in it. 4 towers went up on the perimeter. Between 1939 and 1940, another $1,100,000 went in. There was only containment, engineered and paid for. On the 11th of August, 1934, the penitentiary opened. The first group was 137 men shipped in from Leavenworth. A year later, the population stood at 242. The country now had a prison for its prisons, and the strongest wall in it was not made of steel. It was 1 mile and a quarter of water at 10 to 13 degrees. That was the outside. What Johnston did on the inside had no steel in it at all. Alcatraz did not inherit a philosophy. It inherited an arithmetic. The doctrine of the place fit into one sentence, and the staff repeated it constantly. A prisoner had 4 rights: food, clothing, shelter, medical care. Everything else was a privilege, and every privilege had to be earned. Work was a privilege. Visits were a privilege. The library was a privilege. Even a letter from home was something a man could lose by Tuesday. Most prisons punish by taking things away from a prisoner. Alcatraz started him with nothing and made him buy the rest with obedience. It is a small difference on paper. It is an enormous one to live inside. In the beginning, the system also took his voice. Warden Johnston imposed a rule of silence across the cell house. No conversation at work. No conversation at the table. No conversation in the cells. Men served years without speaking a sentence that was not an order. Nobody ever proved the rule did anything at all. By the 1950s, it had been quietly abandoned. Talking was allowed in the block and in the dining hall, as long as it stayed low. The silence was the theory, counting was the practice. A man on Alcatraz was counted 13 times a day. The ratio of prisoners to officers was the lowest in any American prison of that era. The staff began at 155 people for a few hundred inmates. The regime ran on a clock. 6:30 in the morning, wake up. 6:55, breakfast. 7:30, work. 11:20, lunch. 4:25, dinner. 4:50, locked in for the night. 9:30, lights out. Then the same day again and again, for as many years as the sentence held. The cell itself was 9 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 7 feet high. A bunk, a folding table, a sink, a toilet. In the back wall, down at floor level, sat a ventilation opening. It measured 6 inches by 9, and a metal grill covered it. Nobody worried about it. Nothing the size of a man could pass through a hole that size. Hold on to that measurement as well. 6 inches by 9. The dining hall was the most dangerous room on the island, and the staff knew it. It was the only place where every prisoner stood in one space at one time. That is why the gas hung from the ceiling and why it could be fired from outside. Then there was D block. D block was segregation, and inside D block there were degrees of it. The worst cells carried the numbers 9 to 14. The last of them had no bed, no light, and no fixture of any kind. It had a hole in the floor for a toilet, and that was the entire furniture. A man in D block got 1 shower of 10 minutes a week. He got 1 hour in the yard once a week. Sentences in those cells ran from 3 days up to 19. There was no whip on Alcatraz, and no gag, and no dark chair. There was a room, and a clock, and a door. Here is the strangest fact in the entire administrative record. The most feared prison in the United States never filled up. Its capacity was 336. Its average population was between 260 and 275. It did not reach capacity once in 29 years. At any given moment, Alcatraz held less than 1% of all federal prisoners. Across its whole life, the register counts 1,576 men. Alcatraz was never an answer to the size of American crime. It was a very expensive answer to a very small number of men. It was also famous, and the fame was the point. A government that cannot stop crime can at least be seen holding the worst of it. Two of those names still carry the island on their backs. Al Capone arrived as prisoner number 85. The most powerful criminal of his generation spent much of his sentence in the hospital wing. There was nobody worth paying. The other name is a legend all by itself: Robert Stroud. The world knows him as the Birdman of Alcatraz from the film of 1962. The record says something the title never mentions. Stroud arrived in December of 1942 as prisoner 594. He was forbidden to keep birds on this island. His birds belonged to Leavenworth, the prison before. Almost 300 canaries and 2 books on the diseases of birds. The Birdman of Alcatraz never kept a single bird on Alcatraz. He spent 6 years in segregation and 11 more in the hospital wing. The men who lived beside him described someone far more dangerous than the film allowed. The legend travels the world. The file stays exactly where it was written. And in every one of those cells, down at floor level, one thing had not changed. There was still a hole 6 inches by 9. For 29 years, nobody on the staff gave it a second look. 3 men were about to spend 6 months looking at nothing else. For 29 years, the island advertised a single number: 0. The official record is far less tidy than the slogan. 14 escape attempts. 36 men, 2 of whom tried twice. 23 were caught. 6 were shot dead in the attempt. 2 drowned. And 5 men are listed as missing and presumed drowned. Presumed is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The first came in April of 1936. Joseph Bowers was shot while climbing the fence by the incinerator. Then came the 16th of December, 1937. Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe filed through the bars of a workshop window. The bay outside was under heavy fog and a hard-running tide. They went into the water, and the record simply stops. No bodies were ever recovered. No arrests were ever made. So could a man actually swim it? The island answered that question, and it answered late. On the 16th of December, 1962, another convict went into the same bay. His name was John Paul Scott. He came ashore at Fort Point, directly under the Golden Gate Bridge. He was found in critical condition, and he was carried back to the island. Scott is the only man known for certain to have crossed that water. He did it 6 months after the night this story is about. The bay could be swum. Nobody knew that yet on the 12th of June. In 1938, 3 men killed an officer with a hammer and reached the roof. Thomas Limerick was shot dead up there. In 1945, John Giles tried the only elegant version of it. He stole an army sergeant's uniform out of the laundry, 1 piece at a time. Then he dressed, walked onto the ferry, and rowed away from the island. He was arrested at Angel Island because that ferry did not go where he thought it went. And in May of 1946, an escape turned into a battle. Bernard Coy was a bank robber and a cell house orderly. Orderlies see everything because nobody watches a man with a mop. Coy found the weak point. The bars of the gun gallery could be forced apart. He built a spreader out of a bolt and a nut. Then he starved himself down by 20 pounds so his shoulders would fit through the gap. The device worked. The gallery fell. And then the plan died on a piece of brass. To reach the dock, they needed key 107, the key to the yard. An officer had already hidden it inside a toilet. They tried other keys in that lock, and they jammed it. 6 armed men had captured the inside of a prison and locked themselves into it. The siege ran from the 2nd of May to the 4th. 2 platoons of Marines came across from Treasure Island. They drilled holes in the roof of the cell house and dropped grenades through them. When it ended, 2 officers were dead, William Miller and Harold Stites. 3 prisoners were dead, Coy, Kretzer, and Hubbard. 14 more officers were wounded. Sam Shockley and Mirren Thompson went to the gas chamber at San Quentin. That was December of 1948. Clarence Carnes, who was 19 years old, got a second life sentence instead. That was the loud way out. The three men who actually left did it in silence, with cutlery. Frank Morris arrived on the 18th of January 1960 as prisoner 1441. He had been tested at an intelligence quotient of 133. That number sits in his file, and it is why his file is famous. John Anglin came in October of 1960 as 1476. His brother Clarence followed in January of 1961 as 1485. A fourth man joined them, Alan West, prisoner 1335. And behind their cells ran the thing that made all of it possible, a utility corridor packed with pipes and cables. It was not a secret, it was simply not watched. The plan took roughly 6 months, and it began at the vent, 6 inches by 9 at the bottom of the back wall. They widened those openings by hand, month after month, until a body could pass. Their tools are the most quoted list in prison history. Discarded saw blades found around the grounds, metal spoons taken from the mess hall and sharpened on stone, and a drill improvised from the motor of a vacuum cleaner. Noise was the first problem, and the prison solved it for them. The cell house had a music hour when men were allowed to play instruments. An hour of music covers a great deal of scraping. Discovery was the second problem, and paint solved that one. They built false grills out of cardboard and painted them to match the wall. An officer walking the tier with a flashlight saw a vent. Behind the vent, there was now a hole big enough for a man. Above the cells, the top of the block was an unused space nobody inspected. They turned it into a workshop, and they built 3 things up there. First, the heads. The night count was done through the bars, by flashlight. A guard needed to see a shape and some hair on a pillow. So they mixed soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper into a paste. They painted the faces the color of skin, and they finished them with real human hair collected off the barbershop floor. Second, the raft. They stole more than 50 raincoats over the months. They cut them and sealed them into a rubber boat 6 feet by 14. Third, the life vests. And this is the detail that still unsettles investigators. The seams were vulcanized with heat and pressure. The vests were built far better than anyone expects of a prison workshop. On the night of the 11th of June, 1962, they went. Sometime between 9:30 and 10, 3 men pushed through their own walls. Alan West did not. West had disguised his own vent with cement while he waited for the night. The cement set harder than he expected, and he could not break out in time. By the time he clawed his way through, the other 3 were already on the roof. He went back to his bunk and lay down. The most famous escape in American history has 3 names, because the 4th man was too careful. The other 3 crossed the top of the block and climbed a ventilation shaft to the roof. They came down the outside of the building on a kitchen pipe, about 50 feet of it. They crossed 2 barbed wire fences, each one about 13 feet high. Then they walked to the northeast shore, inflated the raft, and pushed off into the dark. Nobody saw them go. The alarm was not raised for another 9 hours. The manhunt was enormous, and it found almost nothing. On the 14th of June, a paddle was recovered 200 yards off Angel Island. That same day, a sealed wallet came out of the water. Inside it were photographs and addresses belonging to the Anglin brothers. On the 21st, a life vest washed ashore near the Golden Gate Bridge. On the 22nd, a second vest was found 50 yards from the island. That is the entire physical record of what happened that night. No bodies, no boat, no arrests. Not then and not since. On the 31st of December, 1979, the FBI closed its investigation. Its conclusion was that the 3 men had most likely drowned in the cold water of the bay. The Bureau handed the case to the United States Marshals Service. The Marshals did not agree that it was finished. Their file is still open today. Morris and both Anglin brothers are still on their wanted list. 2 later episodes are worth stating exactly, and no further than exactly. In 2013, a letter surfaced claiming to be written by John Anglin. The authorities examined it and reported that the result was not conclusive. The writer never made contact again. In 2014, a team from Delft University modeled the tides of that night. They concluded the crossing was plausible if the men launched at about 11:30. Plausible is not proof, and the researchers never claimed that it was. What the documents actually support is a narrower and stranger sentence. 3 men left a prison that could not be left, and the government of the United States does not know what happened next. The escape did not close Alcatraz. It only made the truth arrive faster. The prison had been dying of arithmetic for years. Concrete and salt water are not friends, and this island had both. Sea spray had been eating the building for as long as it had stood. By 1961, the estimate to make it sound again ran between $3 and $5 million, and the running cost was worse than the repair bill. In 1959, one day of one Alcatraz prisoner cost $10.10. The same day at the penitentiary in Atlanta cost $3. The government was paying more than 3 times the going rate to hold fewer than 300 men. For a policy, it is indefensible. Attorney General Robert Kennedy put the replacement on paper. A new maximum security prison would be built at Marion, in Illinois, on dry land at an ordinary price. On the 21st of March, 1963, the penitentiary closed. 29 years, almost to the month, after the first boat from Leavenworth. The last 27 prisoners were shipped out to Atlanta and to Leavenworth. The final man to walk down the gangway was Frank Weatherman. He carried the last number the prison ever issued, 1576. A reporter asked him how it felt to be leaving. His answer is the best sentence anyone ever wrote about this place. Alcatraz was never no good for anybody. The island did not stay empty for long. In 1969, a group of Native American activists landed and occupied it. They held the island until 1971. The Park Service now calls that occupation the most influential period in the island's history. It launched a movement that reshaped Native American politics across the United States. The warden's house burned on the 1st of June, 1970. Its shell is still standing, open to the sky. A prison built to be permanent had lasted 29 years. The protests that followed it changed a country. Today, Alcatraz belongs to the National Park Service. It is a National Historic Landmark inside the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. About 1.5 million people go there every year. They queue for a boat to reach a place men once died trying to leave. They walk the tier and they stop at 3 cells. The vents are still open. One of the dummy heads survives too, in the collection of the park that runs the island. And in an office in Washington, a file stays open. Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin. The United States Marshal Service has never taken them off its list. The government will not write the ending because the government does not know it. That is the last thing this island proved. A prison can be perfect on paper for 29 years. It only has to fail once, for one night, to be remembered for nothing else. New documentaries every week on Grim Corridors. Subscribe and walk the next corridor with us.